God made us for adventure. And to help us understand this, I'm going to bring our adventurer up. His name is Adventurer Phil. Up you come. So Phil, if you can just stand here, we're going to get you ready for the adventure that you have been made for. So we are going to give you a rucksack. So you've been made ready for adventure. Okay? And there's various things in this rucksack that's going to help you. We are going to give you a cap so that you're ready for the weather. I might have to make it bigger. Not a little bit. I'm sure it'll be fine. There we go. A cap. Nice. Sunglasses made by that famous designer Arnold Clark. Lovely, Phil. Nice. And then a wee teddy to keep you company so that you're happy and cheerful on your way. So Phil can just wander around here, this beautiful world that God has made, exploring and enjoying this great adventure that God has given to us. As Phil comes back into the middle, we're being reminded that we have been made for adventure. However, that adventure has been spoiled by sin. And that's the second big truth that we have to know and understand from the Bible. So we've been made by God, made for something beautiful, made for adventure, but that adventure has been spoiled by sin. So the world that was so beautiful for adventure is now full of things that will make us stumble, things that will get in the way and cause us to fall, and all sorts of things that ruin the beautiful world that we've been made in. And so as Phil wanders around, there's all these stumbling blocks that he can fall over now and that he's struggling with. And we've been left with many, many burdens to carry. So as you come back over here, Phil, he's got this wonderful rucksack that was full of things to help him. Now it's full of burdens. So I'm going to put some stones in his rucksack. There's one. There's that old piece of tar. We can add that. There's some concrete here. So we can add that to the rucksack. You can turn around so people can see it better. I've got a few more stones here to add. A couple of lumps of coal. We can put them in. All these burdens that Phil now has to carry. And so the world around us is broken, stumbling. There's all sorts of burdens on his back. Not only that, sin has left Phil deaf. Okay, and the hat spoiled. And it's also left him blind. Does anybody have a welding mask? And Phil's now blind. So Phil cannot see where he's going. He cannot hear. And instead he's wandering around in this broken world. But most seriously of all, sin has brought death into our experience. And sin has meant that Phil is now tied on his own. And even if he wanders this way around a little bit, he's still tied. And it might loosen him and allow him to wander a little bit, but all the time, he's tied. And over here, we have this big black hole. And so as Phil wanders around in life, now he is struggling and stumbling. Now he can't hear clearly or understand the world around him. He's blind, and all the time, death has got a grip of him. That's the next stage of our adventure. We're saved by Jesus. So, adventurer Phil, back up you come. And when you're standing here, now remember the grip, death's got a strong grip on him. So we need you this way around. Okay? So wandering around, gradually getting pulled closer and closer. Don't move too much. Just walk on the spot. Walk on the spot. That's more effective. Excellent. And so, we're stuck under this grip. Jesus, though, has come to save us. And all of that salvation is accomplished through the cross. And we have that right here. Here is the cross. And in so many ways, the cross is what the whole of the Bible is about. Everything in the Old Testament is pointing towards the cross. Everything in the New Testament is explaining why the cross is so important. And it's the central point of the gospel, which is why, in so many ways, it's the great symbol, the visual symbol of Christianity. So, the first thing that happens is that God calls us. And in order to do that, he takes the ear defenders off. He takes away our deafness. So as we call Phil, he can hear. But you need to stay that way still. But you can hear, can't you? You can hear. These ears are working. He hears us. We call that effectual calling. God is calling us and it has an effect. Phil, Phil, Phil. He's hearing it. At the same time, God opens our eyes so we can see. So the helmet comes up. Now Phil has gone from being deaf and blind to being able to hear and to see. And that's what we call regeneration, because when we talk about being blind to being having sight, what we're really talking about is being spiritually dead to being spiritually alive. And that new life means that Phil can now hear and he can now see. And the result of that is Phil realizes where he is. He sees the problem of sin. And he realizes where he needs to go. He can see the cross. And the next step that involves is that he turns around. And so he turns from heading towards death, turns around to look to Jesus. We call that turning around repentance. And he looks to the cross, and we call that faith. That faith brings him to the cross. He comes to the cross. At the cross, the burden on his shoulders comes off him, and instead, it's placed on the cross. And that's one of the most important aspects of Christianity. You can take the ridiculous stuff off your head as well now. The burden that is on us, our sin, is placed on Jesus on the cross. But something absolutely incredible happens, because the power of the cross is so great that that line gets cut. And Jesus rises from the dead. No longer does sin and death have any power over Jesus and over all who trust in him. All our sin is placed on him. All the burden comes off us, placed on Jesus. But that's not the only thing that happens, because not only does the burden come off Phil, not only is our sin placed on Jesus, Jesus' righteousness is placed on him. So I've got a harness somewhere that I need. Up you come. You bring me the harness. And we want to think of this harness as the righteousness, brilliant, thank you, that is placed on Christ. Now, I think that's a children's harness. Breathe in and put it on, Phil. You'll get it on. So we need to think of that harness as Christ's righteousness being placed on us. So it's just a great exchange. All our mess, all our brokenness placed on Jesus, and all the perfection and security and goodness of Jesus' righteousness is placed on us. And we call that justification, whereby we are declared righteous, no longer condemned. The power of death is broken, and the great result of that is that we are adopted into God's family. And this means that we now have a new security. God the Father, through Jesus, adopts us into his family. We are now safe and secure in him. No longer is Phil bound to the rope that's pulling to death. Instead, he is connected to Jesus, adopted into God's family. He's heading on the path to life. Everything's changed because of Jesus for all who trust in him. So if you are a Christian, or if you become a Christian, it means that you are no longer under the power of death, no longer blind and deaf, no longer lost, and instead we have a new identity, a new security, a new hope, and a new adventure begins. Because it's so important to remember that the journey and adventure of being a Christian doesn't just stop when you become one. In fact, it just starts. And that's teaching us about life as a follower of Jesus, which I want us to also think about. That life involves many privileges and responsibilities, and it brings many triumphs and challenges. But to help us with that, God gives us many blessings. So gone is the old rucksack full of sin, and instead we have new blessings and privileges to help us with our adventure. So let's see what we've got. We've got a map to guide the way. And the map that we use as Christians is the Bible. We've got a walkie-talkie so we can talk. That, of course, is the gift of prayer. We've got various things to keep us safe. Compass to help us know the way. Gloves, if we're cold. High-vis jacket so that we can be seen. And we've got a torch just in case we're struggling. Now, all of these things are just examples of stuff that's helpful. That there's a journey we go on as Christians, and God provides for us so that he can guide us along the way. And that provision is very, very important because sometimes the journey is hard. And so, on this side, we have the kingdom of God, the pathway to life. Sorry to say, this side, we've got the realm of death. No offense. And do you think these chaps are happy that they've lost Phil? Not at all. One of the things that happens is that we face attack. So Phil is walking along, he's walking the spot, and there are people ready to demonstrate what attack looks like. Because sometimes we face doubts, and sometimes we face attacks. Let's see what's happening. Oh, he's under attack! He's under attack! Keep attacking him! Oh, and that's what can happen. When we go along as Christians, we have doubts and we have questions. Sometimes things go wrong. So, good shot. Sometimes we feel sad. Sometimes things worry us. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes people hurt us. Sometimes we can feel very, very discouraged. Oh, direct hit. Well done. So, this is what can happen. In our Christian lives, we can be under attack. And sometimes it can feel as though the kingdom of death wants to get us back and is pulling us hard. But the key point is that Jesus will not let us go. And sometimes there can be a lot of tension and we're being pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled. You can let go, it's okay. We're being pulled, keep pulling, come on, death. Oh! Look at that. Which side's stronger? That side. Always stronger. Always stronger. And so, yes, the journey of the Christian life can sometimes involve challenges. Sometimes it feels like we're under attack, and sometimes it feels like we're being pulled back from where we came from. But this connection to Jesus, what we call our union with Christ, is utterly unbreakable. But sometimes, as Phil, our adventurer, goes on, sometimes he'll feel weak, and although he's heading in the right direction, he can feel like he's stumbling and struggling and battling. There's one more thing that God gives us, and you all need to come up here to demonstrate it. You need to come up, boys and girls, because there's one other thing that we have. Up you come, up you come, up you come. I want you all to gather around Phil. Help him up. He's down on the ground, struggling. Up you come. You need to get alongside him. Get your arms underneath him and help him up. Because the one big thing that Jesus also gives us in our life of discipleship is friends. Companions who are also on this journey. Because I don't have enough harnesses and ropes and rucksacks and everything else, but for all of you here to demonstrate what it's like to be a companion of Phil, you also have a rope and a harness connecting you to Jesus. Because everybody who trusts in Jesus has the same security, the same link. You're on the same journey. You're going along together. And that's why church is so important. That's why church is so beautiful. Because we are to work together to help one another along the way as we follow Jesus. We go through all these ups and downs together. That means that as Phil carries on his journey, this rope never breaks. And he's able to persevere even though there's trials and struggles. And that's why the next step in our order of salvation here is what we call perseverance. And that means that God will never let us go. Even though there are struggles and difficulties and stumbling, we will persevere. And one of the reasons why we know that we'll persevere, and one of the reasons why we know that Phil will always continue on the journey safe and secure, bit by bit, moving forward towards one day going home with Jesus, is because one thing you discover after you become a Christian, and as you go on this journey, you discover that God has loved you forever. And that's why the start of the order of salvation is God's choosing to love us, to save us. And the Bible speaks of that in the language of election, but that's to express the fact that for all who trust in Jesus, it's not something that they started. It's something that God started. And we love him because he first loved us. And there's one final step that goes here. Glorification, when Jesus takes us home. Now, what I really wanted to do today was I wanted to put my sons up there, and I wanted to get them to haul Phil up there, but I thought, not even I'm that crazy, so. But if I could do that, it would point to what it's like, that actually we continue this journey, we stumble on, and sometimes the last part of the journey can be the hardest because our bodies are wasting away and we know more and more of the struggles and difficulties that life can bring. But Jesus' great promise is that he is going to take us to be with himself. And his great promise for all his people is a new creation. And that takes us all the way back to the very start, that this creation was made to be brilliant. Sin has ruined it. In the new creation, Jesus restores it. If you look at Phil did nothing except wander around aimlessly. God is the one who did everything. Jesus is the one who carries all the burden, and all we are asked to do is to put our trust in him.